Welcome to Pick Your Take, the film podcast where everyone's entitled to be wrong. My name's Isaac Leggett.
And I'm also your host, Chris Demoulas. This week we'll be asking our confident audience members to pick your take on the 2004 film Ocean's 12.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to jump right into it, right?
Just jump right. Well, spoilers for probably the entire Ocean's franchise, honestly, and any Steven Soderbergh film. But yeah, let's jump right into it.
We won't spoil any of the really good shit, but definitely we're talking about the Ocean's trilogy, and I think that Ocean's 12 is a great place to kind of base the conversation.
I'm not interested in specifically going out to spoil anything. I'm just putting it up there for anyone listening who hasn't seen the films. We're going to be talking about it and discussing it critically, so keep that in mind, whoever is listening, our lovely audience.
Right. So today with Ocean's 12, my take on this is that I really, really like this movie. I love this movie.
And my take on this is I do not like this movie. I like this movie. Well, Steven Soderbergh, and I'm not going to get too deep into him yet, but he is a director I very much like. And this is definitely something it's one of his few movies that I have watched the whole way through that I really do not enjoy. And I do not like this movie. I'm just curious, did you see this and the rest of the franchise in theaters? What is your viewing experience of these films?
I don't think I saw any of them in theaters.
Wow.
Maybe by 2007 I saw 13 in theaters, but I definitely did not see the first two. But I remember we got a DVD player, and Ocean's 11 was one of the first DVDs we ever rented. Okay. In 0102. I think the first DVD we ever rented was The Time Machine starring Guy Pearce.
Nice.
But I think that early we rented Ocean's 11, and even as a 10-year-old, it was just the coolest movie,
Yep.
And so then, and I remember I was probably in 7th or 8th grade when this film, Ocean's 12, came out. And I had a friend who saw it in theaters and told me about the looky-loo. And I was into it. And so I rented it on DVD. And I liked it from as soon as I saw it. But
sorry.
Then also,
real quick, looky-loo. I'm being very very silly right now.
The looky-loo is the con of the big con in this movie that was kind of the dividing line for a lot of viewers of Tess pretending to be Julia Roberts. Mm-hmm. That is called a looky-loo.
Okay, thank you. And I just didn't remember that. I've seen it. I watched it twice recently. I just couldn't remember that. Sorry.
It's a looky-loo that, as they say, is also a bundle of joy because she would be pretending to be pregnant because Julia Roberts is pregnant. So
that's right.
It's it's a looky-loo with a bundle of joy.
I don't know how I forgot that. You're absolutely right.
And so I heard about that and thought it was a really funny idea and liked it. But then also in college, me and my friends kind of, a bunch of guys who you also knew, we really, really loved those movies and had a couple of weekends where we ended up watching all 3 Ocean's movies.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I've just always been a big fan, and I love the place that this movie has in the trilogy, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw the entire trilogy in theaters. I guess I'll shout out to my best friend growing up, Nick, because we went to so many movies together, and I definitely was the person who was the film guy. He went into, he loved watching movies, but he went into mechanical engineering and pursued that field. So it definitely wasn't his passion as much as it was mine. But almost every weekend, from the age of probably 11 on up, we would go to the movies every weekend. And obviously our parents were giving us money to go, and we would just go. Right. And every weekend we would just pick something to watch. And so I did get to see. I did get to see.
What a time in your life.
No, I fucking loved it, man. I don't know if I said his name, but shout out to Nick if I didn't, if you are listening to this. But yeah, I got to watch all those movies in theaters, and we really loved Ocean's 11. We really enjoyed Ocean's 13. And Ocean's 12 was kind of the song in the laser scene was good. I might download that. And we downloaded that, and we both had that song and loved that song. And I think I watched it once or twice again when we rented it on DVD with my family, like probably around the same time, like 2005 when it was out on DVD. And then probably I watched the franchise again in college, like you with friends. I must have.
Yeah.
And pretty much kind of felt the same. It's never been something that is connected with me. But yeah, that's my first viewing experience. I guess we'll go into some quick statistics. This movie was released in the United States on December 10th, 2004. The major studio that released it was Warner Brothers, directed by Steven Soderbergh. It's written by George Nolfi, who also wrote screenplays for Timeline, The Bourne Ultimatum, The Adjustment Bureau, and more recently, I believe in 2020, he wrote and directed a film called The Banker, which I have not seen yet. But I just thought that was worth mentioning because he did direct that as well. That was his film directorial debut.
Is that the one with Anthony Mackie?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
dope.
I think
Very
so.
cool. Good for him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the screenplay is based on characters. It's based on characters created by George Clayton Johnson and Jack Golden Russell, who in the original Ocean's 11 from 1960, they received a based on a story by credit. So I don't know if that means they just wrote the treatment, because two other people are credited with the screenplay, and only Ocean's 11 credits them as sort of like a based on characters or based on a screenplay that's created by them. They don't get credited in 12 or 13.
So they're kind of just no matter what, get the note. Yeah,
I guess so, because they created these characters, so
Right.
they must have written the treatment, or I'm not sure if I don't think there's a novel called Ocean's 11. So yeah, I think they just
no, and
created
it's also
the
funny
characters.
because probably
Yeah.
the characters that they created are probably like Danny Ocean. You know,
Yeah.
there's probably very few of the other characters. I've seen the original Ocean's 11, but it was a long time ago, and it's not a very good movie.
Yeah, that's, I was going to try to watch it for this episode, but that's the sense I got from just looking it up and stuff like that. And I don't know, it didn't feel like the type of film I wanted to watch. And yeah, I did not watch the 1960 original for this episode. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I have seen it. It didn't make much of an imprint on me at all. Really.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this film, Ocean's 12, it stars George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I'm sorry, I got flubbed for a second. Andy Garcia, Don Cheadle, Bernie Mac, and for some reason in all the movies, I think they do introducing Tess as Julia Roberts, or maybe in the other ones they do introducing Julia Roberts as Tess. I don't know, but I think that's kind of a joke about a scene that comes later in the movie that you discussed.
The Looking
Yeah. And the film also stars Scott Conn, Casey Affleck, Adie Jamison, oh God, I knew I was going to fuck this up.
Xiaobo
Qin, I believe is how you would pronounce it. Vincent Cassel, Eddie Izzard, Elliot Gould, Carl Reiner, Jared Harris, Bruce Willis, Topher Grace, Cherry Jones, Albert Finney. This movie is chock full of stars, and that's kind of the point of the Ocean's franchise.
People who love working with Steven Soderbergh. It's just a pile of people who love working with Soderbergh.
I mean, which is at this point, I'm sure everyone in Hollywood.
Yeah, just about, I think.
If Meryl Streep does now, then everyone does.
Yeah, true. And, there was a time where, like, Catherine Zeta-Jones was, like, working only with him, and I'm sure that has to deal with plenty of, like, studio system, like, misogyny bullshit as well, but also, like, she, clearly loves working with that dude,
No. And, I mean, he was the person who cast her. She was criminally undercast. Like, after she kind of had that huge heyday when she started off after The Mask of Zorro, and for a few years she was in a lot. But I feel like, Hollywood, just the mainstream, unfortunately, studio system ignored her when she should have been. And she's in a lot of good films, but a lot of them are, like, the most recent one I can remember is Side Effects, and that was a Steven Soderbergh movie. So, I mean...
And she's great in that movie.
And she's great in that. So, no, it's definitely a situation where she's amazing, and they do not give her enough chances. They do not. She needs to be more shit. But yeah, that is so. Those are the kind of just the stats. Isaac, do you want to just give us a quick synopsis just to get that out of the way, and then we'll go maybe right into our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, a sequel to 2001's Ocean's 11 that I feel like is a movie that just about everybody has seen. I think it's kind of one of those perfectly undeniable, just like anybody can sit down and just really enjoy this thing. And so it's 3 years after the now infamous Benedict job, as they wanted to call it. Ocean's 11 are tracked down one by one by Terry Benedict, demanding his $160 million returned to him plus interest in only 2 weeks. And being too hot to work in the U.S., they head to Europe and find a job, or the first of a couple jobs. But there they receive a challenge from the mysterious Night Fox, who tipped them off to Benedict in the first place. And they catch the interest of Isabel, an Interpol agent with a quote-unquote rusty past. And we were talking about Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I think that it's cool because she's kind of she is the way into this story, And
the opening shot is literally, it's a great opening shot. It's literally it's through a looking glass at Brad Pitt. It zooms out to be the wide shot of like that apartment as he walks through it, and then it zooms into Catherine Zeta-Jones's face as he joins her to kiss her. It's very 1950s, 1960s Italian cinema. It's a beautiful shot. It's a beautiful
and that's
opening.
A thing that I think we're gonna that's gonna be commented on a decent amount in this episode, talking about this movie, is kind of all of the little homages to European cinema, depending on where they are.
Which
very is
true.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. I mean, I said Italian because that's kind of the one that I think of the most. But you're right. It's just European cinema in general that he's kind of playing homage to. And I feel so I'm going to admit to something right now that I feel very embarrassed about. In college, shout out to a professor we both had, Professor Liebov, Howard Liebov, at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which we discussed in our first episode. I took a class on directing, and our final assignment was basically to read up on one director, a book that we kind of had to read up on one director, and we could pick whoever we wanted to. I picked Steven Soderbergh. Read a whole book on his early films up until Solaris, I believe. Really fascinating read. Got an A on that project. I had no idea that Steven Soderbergh was a director of photography and an editor on so many of his films, credited as someone else. And I did not know until this most recent viewing that he was also the director of photography of the entire Ocean's franchise. He didn't edit it, but he was the
director
DP
of photography. Under the name Peter Andrews, he is the director of photography of probably damn near 70% of his projects.
Yeah, especially after 2000, Traffic was the first, it seems, and then he really was kind of doing that a lot.
I mean, if you really want to talk about the insane career that Soderbergh has had, that it could be an entire conversation on its own, but that insane run that he did in the the mid 2000s, where he was just pounding out movies, and then quote unquote retired, and then did 2 full seasons, 20 episodes of The Knick that he directed and shot, all 20 episodes, and it's just the guy's a machine.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, you say that the 2000s is kind of when he really, he's been making movies since, Sex, Lies, and Videotape came out in 1989, and he's been...
Yeah, I think it's 89,
He's been making movies through the 90s. It's just, most of it's a blind spot for me up until, Aaron Brockovich, and that is sort of the moment where his career just kind of takes a trajectory, maybe you could argue out of sight, but Aaron Brockovich, it just takes an upward trajectory. And I think his best string of films came in sort of the later 2000s, up until 2011, when Contagion, Haywire, Side Effects came out. I feel all of those movies were some of his strongest stuff, and I think Logan
especially
Lucky, is up there as well. What were we gonna say?
Well, just especially as kind of like a filmmaking unit that he had become. It's really a real testament to it, of just him being able to jump through genres and find so many actors that just fucking love working with him, and is constantly challenging himself, and has embraced, especially in this new era, has embraced digital filmmaking, I think, in one of the most kind of like holistic and like open-hearted ways, where he's just like, we can just like get a good light on something, rehearse a scene, shoot it in one take, maybe two takes, couple shots. I'm editing it in the car on the way to the next location, you know?
Yep.
And he can just drop it into the sequence, and he's just making movies, because he's like, I said I was retiring, and then all of a sudden making movies became infinitely easier. And
that's interesting. I didn't know he said that. That's interesting.
Well, maybe not in those words, like as I just said, but like just he has so embraced kind of the what he did with Let Them All Talk last year, where he just like got a couple digital cameras and just took, Meryl Streep, Diane Wiest, Candice Bergen, and Lucas Hedges out on a cruise, and they just went on a cruise for a couple weeks and shot a movie. And it's like, that's dope. That's so, I mean, and he's in the position to do that. He had that incredible year in 2000 where he was twice nominated for Best Director.
Won it as well, I believe, for Traffic.
And won for Traffic, got Julia Roberts her Oscar for Erin Brockovich. That was also, Traffic also had Catherine Zeta-Jones in it. Really was like a big stepping point for her, just kind of in like showing where she was working in Hollywood. And then just kind of kept working, man. And then like made Ocean's 11 that I really believe is like one of the best movies ever made. And I just mean that in the sense of like the best movie. Like the way that if it's on TBS or something, you are watching it until it's over. Like most people know the last half of Ocean's 11 way better than they know the opening scene of Ocean's 11, but everybody knows the ending of Ocean's 11 because they've all watched it on cable so many times. And it's like, to me, it's like one of those movies that like you're kind of hard pressed to find somebody who that doesn't work for in some way. I think that's comparable to like My Cousin Vinny, just like a movie that like, who doesn't like My Cousin Vinny?
Yeah, no, I mean, comparing Ocean's 11 to My Cousin Vinny, it's a very similar kind of love. Even though now I'm sure if I went back and watched My Cousin Vinny, I'm sure there's a lot of like, I'm sure there's some insensitive humor in that that might be present. And maybe there is, I'm trying to think of, I just recently rewatched Ocean's 11. I don't think there's much inappropriateness. There's not much even like, because there's no objectifying of Julia Roberts or really of
not
any of
in
the
any
females.
particular way.
Not really.
I mean,
no.
some of the shit with Yen could definitely be considered a little dicey.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
Yen gets a little dicey, but I also think that there's something about the way that everybody relates to Yen that like maybe a lot of his behavior is played as jokes, but none of the characters ever treat him like a joke. Like they're all they all admire and respect Yen so much in a way that like I don't know. There's his placement in the team is still a great thing. I mean, he really is a great character.
It's very valued, and there is kind of a logic joke that is an ongoing joke in the entire franchise, which is somehow Yen is constantly speaking Mandarin, and someone
understands him.
Well, everyone understands him and is able to speak back in English, and he apparently can also understand English. So it's like this joke that like they all can speak the same language, but they all just constantly choose to speak a different language to each other, and they still understand each other. It's just kind of another ongoing joke that is sort of the charm of the franchise in a whole. I agree, but I mean, Brad Pitt. George Clooney saying like, which one is he? And Brad Pitt saying the little Chinese one. That might be getting a little problematic.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's fair. I respect that. Yeah.
But other than that,
he's a fun character.
But yeah, I mean, just going back to really quickly, we went off on a tangent, but we were talking about Steven Soderbergh's career, and I just wanted to mention that I haven't seen his most recent stuff. in terms of Let Them All Talk, The Laundromat, High Flying Bird. The last one I saw was Unsane. Did you ever see Unsane?
I actually haven't seen that.
That was his movie that he shot on a cell phone. That was kind of the big news. He shot it on an iPhone, and that movie is fucking great. It's actually really.
He shot all of High Flying Bird on iPhones and iPads.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's really cool.
He's
really
just
cool.
like about that now. It's just like how it's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention Unsane because Unsane is just it's dumb to say this. It is an insane movie. It definitely is a movie that makes you feel kind of crazy by the end of it. But it's an interesting.
And that's
experience.
Claire Foy, right?
Yeah, she's amazing.
Cool.
In
Good
it.
for her. Good for her.
Yeah, she's amazing in that.
You know, Soderbergh is one of those directors that I often can easily tell people is like my favorite director, but it also feels like a bit of a cheat because like he's my favorite director because he like can give me absolutely anything and will have a fun take on it, and I don't expect anything out of him, so whatever I get is always just like a fun thing. And I think that, you know, he's comparable maybe to the Coens in that way, but is, you know, even more prolific than them, and they have like 19, 20 films in their filmography, you know, and he's made more than them. But so I just think he's just, you know, he's kind of a, you know, and he's just like an iconic filmmaker. I really think that. And I think that this movie is just him flexing his muscles basically as a DP, honestly. The first act of this movie is so good. I love the first act of this movie because it takes the twist of like the getting the gang back together thing, and instead of like we're tracking everyone down and we're getting the gang back together, it's just we're reintroducing the gang with Benedict finding them one by one. And like of the 11 introductions, like I think only one of them isn't one take, like one shot, that like we are just like, we got into a room, we lit it really well, here's our angle, here's our camera move, here's the performance, Terry Benedict shows up, and it's just like it's kind of this constantly churning machine of all of these really fun, like introduce the characters, bring in Terry Benedict. And I don't know, I love it.
I mean, I love the way he's shooting the films. It's interesting. I guess we'll just go right into our thoughts about the movie. I'll kind of like, I'll comment on what you said basically. But I really, as I said, I really like the opening. And I sort of almost read that scene as the movie is telling us that Brad Pitt is kind of going to be the main character of this story, or like it's almost more going to be about his character than about Ocean. And when we see Catherine Zeta-Jones, it's like, I read that as, and maybe incorrectly, but I read that as this is our main antagonist. This is the problem. This is going to be the issue of this film. And I love that opening scene. I love Brad Pitt fleeing from like the window, like after he turns on the shower and just instantly like jumping out, and you have that freeze frame, which it calls back to at the end. I love all of that stuff so much. And when I get to George Clooney's introduction, I'm a little like, oh, this kind of feels like the same beat in the first film, except this one's a little less believable because he's literally being obvious about casing a bank. Like he's just not even being at all coy about it, just stating right up front, like, oh, I've been in a vault before when it was robbed. And it's just like, well, there's only one way you could actually be in a vault while it was being robbed. There was no other reason why a civilian would be allowed in there. But it's just like, okay, I let that slide. But when Terry shows up, I'm mostly just like, okay, I liked that sequence because I like that we established Julia Roberts and her relationship with George Clooney, and they have that secret code that she says that kind of like tips him off to what's happening. But that scene when Terry is talking to Julia Roberts and all of the introduction scenes, just for some reason I find it so wearing on my patience. Like I find it so repetitive and like boring, and I don't find kind of I don't know. I don't find the introductions of the characters charming in a story level, but I agree the camera is very much saying like, pay attention to this. This is something very interesting. And it has to, I guess it sort of relates to why I don't enjoy this movie because a lot of it is really, to me, it's like I'm paying attention a lot more to the directing than I am the story. And I don't think that's because I actually think I mean that as a compliment to Steven Soderbergh, because I think that this script's story is the main issue I have with it, and how that story is sort of like told to us in the dialogue that really kind of I don't think is all that interesting. And I feel like Steven Soderbergh is kind of put in this position where he is, one, kind of like able to do this beautiful film with the photography, but also it's kind of because I don't know, it's kind of just because his directing is almost distracting to me in a weird way, because it's the only thing I'm sort of paying attention to, because Soderbergh does something, and I'll just kind of go into my main thought about this. Yeah. Soderbergh he does something really well in this movie, and that is, it's something that Robert Altman also does really well in his films. He shoots naturalistic dialogue scenes really well in this movie. Ocean's Crew, it's almost like every scene where they're meeting up, it's almost like they're talking over each other, but you can still understand everything that they're saying. And it's because the camera it's not cutting from one person to another to sort of like get that usual, like, this person's saying this line and this person's saying this line. He's just shooting one or two characters, or he's staying really wide and doing something else that he does really well, which is just presenting the environment to you, and you see kind of like where all the characters are in the room. And I think it's because if you actually listen to a lot of those dialogue scenes, a lot of it is very expositional dialogue of information that we either already know, or it's something that is setting up a reveal that's going to come later. It's like some mention of something that is going to come later, and basically like how they lift the house, and like how there are early warnings of like how you can see why lifting the house is going to happen. There are like several kind of like lines that kind of hint you off to Brad Pitt knowing that story from Catherine Zeta-Jones, like all those kind of like setups. And I feel like those dialogue scenes with the group, with Ocean's Crew, they would be dense and boring, and I think Soderbergh kind of makes them digestible. But I really just feel like he's in an uphill battle, and I just feel like Soderbergh's directing in this movie is like overcompensating for what I think is kind of a lack of a good script, which I feel like bad saying.
And that's fine. I guess you're welcome to say it. I vehemently disagree with you on the quality of the script there.
Okay.
If there can be arguments about how much of the exposition or the plotting ultimately matters and all of that, but I think that in terms of the writing of the script, I think that the balance of present exposition, future setups, and jokes is a good balance. And see, the dialogue of this movie is one of my favorite things to just think about. I love all of the jokes in this movie. And, maybe I'm just so in the bag for it, but I just think that as a comedy movie, this is a movie that I watch and I'm laughing at the whole time. I just think it's a really funny movie.
No, I agree with you. It's strange because I think this is a very funny movie, and I actually laughed both times rewatching this movie. But for me, I would laugh sometimes at the cleverness of the dialogue or just the funniness of the dialogue. For me, it was the charm, though, it was lacking. The sort of not just the charm, but also like the script itself and a lot of the performances just have this sort of, I want to use the phrase smug. There's just this overconfident smugness to this entire film where you just have all these characters who, even though there's the threat of death unless they can get $100 million, these people look like the most confident fucking millionaires I've ever seen. And it's just like, I get absolutely no sense of danger from anything. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the humor makes it a funny experience and it makes it a comical experience, but it almost deflates from just kind of the story itself. And also I feel like I'm missing the charm for some reason. For some reason, like, everyone here just doesn't seem like they're as into it and having as much fun to me. And maybe they are, but honestly, and I won't say it for everyone, but because I do think Catherine Zeta-Jones is fucking phenomenal. Her performance is amazing in this.
movie. Yeah.
And I think Matt Damon and Don Cheadle are also putting in performances. Like, they're putting in really great characters and performances. Brad Pitt is terrible in this movie. I really think Brad Pitt is one of the least good things in this movie. And every time I see him, and every time I see him munching on food, I'm just like, God, I despise this person. I hate how he just seems smug and like overconfident at every moment. I root for him still, but I don't think he is definitely not the chemistry of the Catherine Zeta-Jones relationship, like in terms of the Isabel Rusty relationship. She has a lot more. Sorry, go ahead.
For me, I read Pitt's character. I read Rusty as distracted in this movie because he's the one who knows the overhanging threat of Isabel that nobody else is thinking about other than Frank, because Frank always knows.
Right.
Who also ultimately Bernie Mac does not get much to do in this movie, which is a bummer.
Sadly, very sad. Yes.
But he. I think that to me he reads as distracted, but that's fair if you don't like Brad Pitt in this movie.
Fair enough. No. I don't read that. Yeah, for some reason and I don't know. And I mean, you know what? I'm gonna say up front, there might be some element of personalness to this, because now every time I look at Brad Pitt, I just see the guy who has like broken the hearts of two of the most beautiful women who have ever lived.
Oh, my
word! Like, you know what? Fuck this guy.
Oh man, whatever.
But for some reason, but I feel that more in Ocean's 12 than I do. I think he's putting in better performances in Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13, and I don't think he is a bad actor. I think that he's not given much to do, and when he is, and maybe you're right. Maybe there's something going on in the performance subtext that I'm not reading into. But to me, in the text, he's not always getting really interesting stuff to say, and when he is sort of saying clever things, it just kind of feels inauthentic to me, and just sort of like someone trying really hard to sort of act calm. So I do get some sense that there is something going on internally, but for some reason, just his performance and the performance of like people like Andy Garcia and even George Clooney, for some reason, I just really find all of their performances kind of just... Andy Garcia literally is a phoned in role. Like, he literally has a scene where he's like talking on the phone and like signing papers and like walking to an expensive desk, and I'm just like, no one's acting in this movie.
Him being this, he's kind of this overlooming threat, which is, sometimes ends up not in the moment you stop even thinking about when he's not on screen. But you cannot tell me that Andy Garcia is not eating a ham sandwich in the first act of this movie when he shows up like playing the piano and turns to look at Jared Harris and Don Cheadle in like the phone ringing bit, like the light coming up on Andy Garcia, like looking over his sunglasses, like he is just feasting on it. And I don't know, I'm here for it.
No, I mean, in terms of scenes like that, my only comment is basically like I enjoyed them all on an individual level as fun, little like humorous scenes, but as like something that was strung together as kind of like this montage that was sort of once again reintroducing all the characters. Yeah, it just kind of felt a little. And I mean, the Ocean's 11 franchise is a franchise that exists on tropes and repeating things that we've seen in other films. But for some strange reason, this one it really kind of like, I found it, when it's all cut together, I found it not as engaging, even though on an individual scene level, I was sometimes laughing at a lot of those scene introductions. But I was just like, okay, I'm ready for this story to go forward. And right now you've introduced two antagonists and we're just introducing the characters. And it feels like it's 10 minutes of that before, it might even be longer before we really get into, before we really get into what they're going to be doing. And I just, I don't know if I kind of, even though I think Andy Garcia is good in those scenes, I agree. It's after those scenes that it really becomes a problem. And I think it's because a lot of what he's doing is maybe that he's not sort of like in an environment where lighting and the camera is and like other characters to kind of like work off of. Because in later scenes, he's just kind of in that mansion in his chair smoking his cigar. and it's just
No, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know, like those scenes just, that's why this film just kind of feels like there's no threat of danger to me, because every time it pops back to Andy Garcia, I'm just like, there he is sitting comfortably in his chair smoking his cigar. Like he doesn't seem like a threat, but I know he is, and I know the movie, and I mean the only scene that I actually have a sense of danger is when he blows up Brad Pitt's car, and that's a great
Which is
scene.
a good scene.
It's a great scene, but tonally I feel like is kind of a crime heist dark drama tone that we never really get back to again in this film. Like I don't know if
I guess that's fair.
Yeah. So I mean,
but
to
me, when I think about kind of the performances and the relationship that everyone's having, I don't know. I more lock into the fact that, there's even the line of dialogue where they say, like, we're forcing it, aren't we? And I think about that a lot, where it's like, I think a lot of it is like, the first movie is them all coming together with this purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're all so locked in, and then, they all pat each other on the shoulder and they walk away. And this next one is like, oh, we all have to like kind of scrappy figure out what to do. And yeah, they're all very playing it cool, but it's also that like, they all have to like be around each other and like live in these tight hotel rooms. And, kind of, I think that it's kind of forcing them all to actually, wonder, like, did we pull off a job together, or are we a crew? And there's a difference, and I think that is which ultimately the point of the third one is that they all come back in retribution of Ruben, which is proving that they're all a crew, because the fact that it is only personal. And I think that that's just kind of a great set of character arcs, and that also the real secret sauce to this movie, I think you're right, because they set up Pitt as kind of the lead because he's in the opening that introduces Isabel. Right. But the secret sauce of this movie to me is Matt Damon. And I know that's such a weird statement to make.
In what way?
I think Linus is the key to this trilogy. I think he's a really great character. And I think that his performance of being, in the first one, he's the one more. He's who makes it 11. He's the last one they get, and he's the young kid. And that, like, he's
the only person who has an arc in the three films, really. Like, he has a very major arc.
He is the noticeable arc, really, in the three films, because this one is all about him wanting a position of leadership. Yep. When he gets a position of leadership, he kind of fumbles it. He does something insane. He tries the looky-loo, because only Linus would fucking quarterback that play. And then by the third one, he's a co-lead here, and he's he's a main part of the con. And by the end of the movie, he's sitting there, and by the end of 13, he's sitting there at the airport with Danny and Rusty as an equal. And I think that that's such a cool arc that character takes. And this middle movie is just, I think, a lot of funny stumbling blocks for him. And
it's interesting how I agree with you wholeheartedly. I really do think Matt Damon is one of the stronger aspects of this movie in terms of just a performance, and also as a character throughout the films. I think he's very strong. I think that because it's interesting how I do think I enjoy Ocean's 11 the best. I would say 13 next, and then 12 obviously the least. In my case, obviously the least. And I do think that when I watched 13, I was sort of like sitting there going like, oh wow, like I don't know if this was planned, but even though I don't enjoy a lot of the sequences from 12, I enjoy a lot of the ways that 13 continues those sequences. So I very much
that's a big argument. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much in a mixed place about it, because like, you don't get a lot of the cool character moments in 13 without some of these setups that 12 is doing. And right, I do think that Matt
really
Damon
feel organic in 13. Yeah.
Yes. And I do feel like Matt Damon is I do feel like his character is one of the stronger of the characters, but I also feel like there's something directly associated with his character in this film that I feel like is one of the, well, it's not one of the weaker parts of the film, but it's something that I don't love, which is Cherry Jones showing up, and I absolutely love Cherry Jones as an actress.
Yeah, she's great.
But she kind of just shows up as a Deus Ex Machina character in this film. Like she kind of is just like, and they introduce, a Deus Ex Machina. Damn it. And they do introduce
Rejoice with me.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first movie where Matt Damon in dialogue sort of like mentions his parents. He never really talks about them in the first one.
He is only in reference to his parents in the first one. In the first one,
so there is a dialogue reference.
When we first meet him at the restaurant where he and Clooney have their first dialogue scene, Clooney says, Bobby Caldwell recommended you. And he goes, yeah, well, like, fathers speak highly of their kids. And he like didn't know that he was his father.
That's right. Okay.
And then when they're all waiting around the pool and Ruben walks up to him and is like, oh, you're Bobby Caldwell's kid, get in the goddamn house.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Thank you.
And so it's only ever been in reference to his parents. And his dad eventually shows up as a Deus Ex Machina in 13 as well.
But for some reason, his dad showing up as a Deus Ex Machina felt better to me, because at least then he actually becomes an intricate part of the plan after that. Like, he shows up, but then he does something other than just showing up. And in this movie, when Cherry Jones shows up, not only did I really don't, I mean, this is not, well, actually, you know what, I will say it, whatever. I really don't like the shot revealing all of them leaving. The continued cut zoom in shot that they do over and over again, like the Terry introduction, that felt so repetitive. And after like about 4 takes of it, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting dizzy and I just don't want to see this. So I was like double annoyed with Cherry Jones showing up as a Deus Ex Machina. And then later in the movie also pulls another Deus Ex Machina with the Lamarck character sort of not really showing up, but the Lamarck character sort of being this character that I was like, haha, I actually interacted with Ocean and Rusty to begin with. And that is another sort of just like, I don't like that reveal. And that just kind of felt like, that just kind of felt like the story kind of not really knowing like it had anywhere else to go. And so you have these kind of 2 moments to kind of just like, oh, well, they're all in jail. Well, Matt Damon's mom can just come in and save the day. Yeah. It's like, well, they can't steal this object anymore. No, Lamarck actually already gave it to them. It's like...
Well, I guess to me, that all is part of, I think those are all of a piece. I think that those are kind of a part of a series of plot points that you either accept or you don't, with kind of the third act of this movie, with the fact that it's all about, the way it ultimately plays out is that they get into this kind of this competition with the Night Fox to see who can steal this egg. They try 2 different ways to steal the egg. Turns out that the Night Fox had already stolen it before that and put it with a replica, but turns out that had all been a replica in the first place, and that it was all in a bag and they just had to steal the bag. And the thing about it that I connect with, that I think makes it all, and it's just a thing of like, this is certainly coming from the perspective of a person who's watched this movie like 12 times. You know what I mean? Like, this is when you're actually looking at the way things go.
You've seen Ocean's 12 times.
Right, sure. But like that, they have the egg before the challenge is actually even set by Vincent Cassal's character.
Yep.
They get it off the train before they get the challenge from him.
Yep.
And to me, that means that, yes, they're going through this challenge because they want him to pay off the debt, right? And they're willing to kind of play through the charade to let him do his thing, so then they can just, kind of get the rug out from under him and kind of trick him into. So they're just doing a long con performing this for him, right? But also, I think it's that they, I imagine to a certain extent, always knew that they had Cherry Jones ready from the beginning. When they are putting together this plan, that, okay, great, we'll go through this process, and even if we get caught, we have our way out. They would, and that is the thing that I take from this, is that they always had that way out planned, because like they wouldn't go into the situation without having that there.
But the fact that they have that backup plan always makes me think that the reason why there's no sense of danger is because there actually is no sense of danger. Like, it feels like a long con on the audience. Like, it's sort of like saying...
Well, it is. That's the
because
thing.
the question I'm asking the whole time is, how are they going to get this egg? How are they going to defeat this person? And it feels like all of the answers that this movie has are less interesting than the question. Like, for example, how do they get how do they try to get the document, the $2 million document at first? They have to literally lift a building, which feels like the most far-fetched thing in this entire franchise, even though they explained it, but it's because of the shot itself that it feels so far-fetched. But they have to literally lift a building.
Cool. It's pretty cool, though.
But then they're going to say, okay, after they've lifted a building and made a shot that's impossible and broken into a house that's impossible, someone did it first, who didn't even lift the building. And then, like, later it's just like, oh, how are they going to get this egg? They already had it this whole time. They've just been pretending to actually act as if they needed to get it. And it's just like, what the fuck? That just felt like such a long con on me. And by the end, like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this reveal literally feels like I've wasted my time ever since George Clooney has the conversation with the Night Fox. And obviously, you know, George Clooney is hiding something in that scene, because as he's walking away, Night Fox, like, yells out the challenge, and you could just tell by the way George Clooney's performing it, he was waiting for him to stop him, basically. And I don't know, I really think that, yeah, like, what I said before, like, the answers are less interesting than the questions of this movie, and the setups are more interesting than the reveals, and when you get to the end of it all, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, and we're done. Like even though it ends on a freeze frame, which calls back to the opening, it also just kind of feels like, that's it, wrapped. Like, and the script kind of just does that too. It's like, well, Lamarck, you know, he already had the egg, and now his daughter's happy, and now she can have a life with criminals. And it's just like, okay.
I mean, I guess that's fair. And to me, it ultimately, you realize that it's about this group of people who are just doing what they love, you know, like, it's that these people are criminals who, you know, the way that Basher said it in the first one of like, oh, it'll be great to work with proper villains again, like the way that they see of like us, like we're doing, like we take our job seriously. And I think that that they all enjoy it so much, even in the way that like Cherry Jones kind of is just busting Linus's chops when they're driving away, where she's like, oh, you did good with what you had. And it's like, he got caught. Like, he totally got caught, got put in jail, and you had to get him out of jail. And she's still just smirking because like they all just fucking love doing this. And that like that you realize that you're just watching these people of like, they all want it to work, and they all have to like figure out how to fucking stand each other. You know, I think that like, you know, I laugh at the sequence of them standing on the train platform and Virgil and Turk not knowing Danny's age. Like, I think that's like just like a really hilarious scene of these people where it's like, why on earth would, you know, even just like, why on earth would George Clooney be hanging out with Casey Affleck and Scott Conn? Like, that's just that's like a silly thing to imagine. Yeah. So just like have them, like, give them a scene to just kind of be funny together. And like, like this group of people slowly coalescing, and, you know, Tess's involvement, and, you know, her, you know, going from kind of complacency to like being part of it. I don't know, it just kind of ultimately feels like this whole thing about that it ultimately, you're right, it is kind of pulling a lot of needless wool over the eyes of the viewer, but at the end of the day, you're just realizing that you're watching this group of people who were like, well, we did steal some good shit together, and like, we love doing this, so like, let's see if we can do it. Like, and I don't know, like, I like that.
No, I mean, there is the charm of this movie, and the charm of all three movies does come in large part to just seeing the people on screen, knowing these characters and watching them interact. It's just, for me, the content of what they were saying to each other was not engaging, and the plotting just felt kind of, one thing happens and then another thing happens. And I mean, one could also describe it really as conflict resolution. Well, actually, conflict and then another conflict and then another conflict. Like, you can kind of read it as like, as soon as they try to do something else goes wrong. But to me, it just felt too often like every time the script made him, took a major turn, it was a twist that just felt like a twist that was a little too unbelievable. Like the Night Fox beat them to it, even though they had to literally lift a fucking building to get in there. And like, I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head, but it's just, yeah. And the one scene that you talked about earlier, the Julia Roberts scene.
Yeah, I was going to ask because I feel like that's the central piece of this movie.
I think Julia Roberts is good in this film. I do not find the concept of her playing herself at all amusing. I do not enjoy. I think Bruce Willis is like I do not like him in this movie. I don't think him showing up is at all humorous. The whole sequence just feels
so funny.
The whole sequence kind of feels to me actually more like a momentum killer. But to be honest, it sort of felt like the momentum is sort of lost after the group arrest to begin with. Like a lot of like when the major group characters get arrested and we only have Matt Damon, Don Cheadle, and Scott Conn. I really wanted that to be a fun part of the movie, but I really didn't think that that's kind of where the movie sort of like loses a lot of momentum for me is when Julia Roberts shows up, which is unfortunate because I do enjoy her, but yeah, the scenes in the museum with her pretending to be Julia Roberts, pretending to be herself, and Bruce Willis showing up, like it's saved by Catherine Zeta-Jones because I really do think Catherine Zeta-Jones is the saving grace of this movie. She is not only the only thing that gets me anywhere near an emotional reaction in this entire franchise when she sees her father Albert Finney at the end. Like she's
so good, man.
She's flawless in this movie. And so whenever she shows up, I'm always just like, oh my gosh, just stay on screen forever. Like your character is so interesting to me.
Well, I also think that you make a very good point there also in the sense that like one of the big logic leaps in this, in the sense of like they did all this trouble to break into this guy's house and the Night Fox was already there. The reason to me that sells, the reason that I can buy that is because it's told from the perspective of, you know, amazing Catherine Zeta-Jones doing like the Will Graham walking through the crime scene and, you know, connecting one thing and realizing moment to moment what happens. Like the only reason I think that sequence works is because it's seen from her perspective.
Right. Okay.
At least for me.
But I mean, it works, but the entire time she's analyzing it as if Ocean's crew was the one to break in and do it. So, and I mean, she senses that Night Fox was there first, but do we ever actually reveal how she thinks that other than like, I mean, because I mean,
well, she thinks it because they didn't open. They brought a drill, but the safe wasn't opened with a drill.
But what I'm asking is, she didn't find any evidence of anyone else getting into that building. Like there was no other evidence in.
No, they never describe how the Night Fox gets in. No.
So that just seems like that's.
I mean, that can be bullshit if you think that's bullshit.
I just think that's such bullshit because if you're already telling us it was nearly impossible for them to do this, I don't understand how I'm supposed to believe. Because then, like, anything that you tell me that's impossible is impossible at that point. And I guess, I don't know, like, I guess in this franchise, that's all they ever do. But for some strange reason, like, that just felt like it was asking me to go a little too far into, like, this is already something impossible they're doing. And someone else did it even more so. And it's like, well, he didn't lift a building, so how did he do it?
Yeah, I mean, and to me, I guess, so, like, I think another cool aspect of the tonal part of this movie that I really would make a big argument for, and I promise this is kind of like tying back to what we're talking about.
No, of course.
Is that that the first one, Ocean's 11, is a remake, right? And so it's this homage to like the Vegas cool Rat Pack vibe, and that when making Ocean's 12. The first decision about making Ocean's 12 and the development of this was that Soderbergh and Clooney were on a transatlantic flight from U.S. to Europe to do publicity for maybe Solaris, because that came out right after Ocean's 11, I think. Yeah. And while they were on the flight, the idea occurred to them. And the first idea was do it in Europe. Before they had any other plot, it was do it in Europe. And that the way that 11 is this homage to the movie that it's a remake of, and to kind of like American heist vibe, that Ocean's 12 is very much this homage to European crime movies. And I think that it has, like a lot of like the original Italian Job vibe to it. And which, is kind of a fun thing in that, like, if it weren't for Ocean's 11 and the success of it, the Italian Job wouldn't have been remade. And then they make Ocean's 12 that's kind of like homaging the Italian Job. But then also a big aspect that they take, that they're like, okay, what is the European version of like a criminal like this? And I think that the character of the gentleman thief that they try to make the Night Fox, this idea of like Lupin the Third or someone who is this like absolute narcissist who is all about like leaving his mark and calling his shot and can get away with absolute anything in almost a cartoonish way. And that like gentlemen thieves are a really, it's a shtick. And the fact that they kind of have the actual real conflict of this movie is just that there is a gentleman thief who wants to be better than them. I think is a cool way of extending this world, that, because, the whole point is he tips Benedict off, which is why they come and they end up going to Europe. So then he can then challenge them. It's all because he wants to be better than them. And that I think that's just such a cool way of like, okay, if we're going to make a sequel to this, if we're going to extend it and think about it from a different perspective, that kind of creating this new sort of homage and injecting that into the movie that they had made. I don't know. I think thematically really works and makes the kind of the, adding in the Interpol agent and stuff like that. I don't know. I like it a lot, I guess is.
No, thematically, I think what you're saying is true. But for me, this is another example where an element of this script, I think, is done better in the third one. Night Fox is just completely not a compelling villain to me. Like, he is just... Yeah. I read him as annoying and childish, and it leaves me just kind of feeling like uninvested anytime he's on screen. And once again, he's just kind of adding to just the smugness of this entire movie that I just like. Once it's just like I was about to do a terrible insensitive thing, but it's just he shows up and he's just like
go for it. No.
He just shows up and he's like, I'm much smarter than you, and George Clooney's like, no, we're smarter than you, and then Catherine Zeta-Jones is like, no, I'm smarter than you. It's just like everyone are these overly confident people just being like, we're gonna beat you. No, I'm gonna beat you.
Con men movies are.
I know, but for some strange reason, this one felt, because there are so many antagonists, this one feels less focused than the other two, and I think
it is wildly unfocused. I will give
wildly
you that.
Unfocused. And I mean, I get that that's the point to it, but I just, for some reason, like, I really get weirdly emotionally invested in Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13, like early on, because there's sort of like, there's Danny and his wife, and then in 13 there's like, fuck this guy because he fucked with Elliot Gould's character.
With Ruben, yeah.
And I mean, this one just, Andy Garcia shows up and it's like, oh, for a moment I'm scared, but then after he's in 10 scenes, I'm like, okay, you're a little less scary. And then I'm also just kind of bummed because I'm like, oh man, I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was going to be the main antagonist, but now I don't even know who's the main antagonist. Like, maybe an argument can be said that Andy Garcia is the main one because he's kind of the person overseeing the whole time, but he feels the
main
least
antagonist
present.
is the Night Fox. It's Vincent Cassel, because he's the one who sets it all in motion. He's the main antagonist.
See, I almost read that Catherine Zeta-Jones is the main antagonist of the story in a weird way. Like, but
the opening could suggest that, and she becomes she ends up, I guess, for lack of, in terms of talking about tropes or character archetypes, she becomes kind of the independent troublemaker of the story. Mm-hmm. That she's just this like extra character who's kind of
I guess that's true.
a step behind, is figuring it out, is kind of a thorn in the paw of them. It's like the who is it? The Russian detective chasing Tom Cruise in Ghost Protocol,
Right.
who's kind of like a fun character, but has a couple scenes. It's just a guy who, when we're not fighting the terrorists, he's going to show up to cause another problem, and so she kind of ends up playing that role and then also becoming a love interest, which, some people might consider kind of, limiting, which I guess is true. But like, these are very like cool, sexy movies that it's about, I think that's forgivable.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I understand, but yeah, for some reason, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. It's also, I don't know. And I think
I honestly got
distracted
by the fact that I did that horrible French accent. And I'm like, oh no. How are you going to say?
But I also think it's cool because if you're, because one of the things that everyone always said about Ocean's 13 is that, it's this thing that closes out the trilogy, is this real return to form. And I would personally make the argument that you can't have a return to form without having a weird middle chapter. If Ocean's 13 were the direct sequel to Ocean's 11, it would not be anywhere near as interesting. And I think that you were saying that earlier with the things that are set up here and paid off there.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, it's like weird franchise storytelling that feels organic in a way where it's just like, what would be these characters' next step in a way that maybe isn't always the most compelling things for audience, which I guess is alienating or an ask, as someone would say. But like, I don't know. I like that.
Well, the thing is when I think about the story beats and when I actually talk it out in my head, I think it's really an interesting story to tell. But I think that something else needed to be done in the dialogue, because so much of the dialogue scenes with the crew, and I mean a lot of the dialogue scenes in Ocean's 11 and 13 it's a lot of talking about what they're going to do. It's usually a lot of exposition-based dialogue as well. But for some strange reason in this one, it just really felt like it was, I don't know, like I really didn't, like when you were talking about, in the train sequence, I was focusing on the characters interacting and all these things. And even though I would enjoy those sequences, it's like, okay, so I'm either getting a fun interaction between a character or I'm just sort of getting these kind of like plot developments that we need to be set up for later, or we're talking about things we already know. Like it just felt kind of, after a while, like it just felt like the same thing. And I don't know how the content in there could have been different, to be honest, but I just feel like it could have been done better. Like these reveals could have been done in a different way. And I don't know, like I feel like the Deus Ex Machinas by the end are just too much, and I wish they found a more, in my mind, I wish they found a more kind of like, I wish the plan, just like it really is perfect only in Ocean's 11. When you have the reveal of sort of like Brad Pitt and the SWAT team, it kind of just brings everything together for you, and you just have this cathartic moment with the entire crew, and it's so satisfying. And I guess hoping for that ever in any of these franchises is like kind of too much, to be honest, because I don't think they ever really get that moment ever again in the other two. But I just wish there was something closer to that.
Plot twist reveals like that, I think that there isn't anything that really matches it.
No, because I mean, in 13, when everyone is like doing all the winnings at the casino, it's a little bit of a stretch to believe that every single table they somehow rigged, because they only have kind of that one little dice thing with their fingers. Like, how can they be making everyone win? But you kind of go with it. It's not quite as...
and that's more of kind of that, like, is built to, that's a thing that the reason you go with it is because they have brought you along. You're expecting it at that point. That's not like a surprise. The whole point of that is that you see what's coming there. They prepare you for that. Yeah, so
and I
that's
guess
a different kind of setup payoff.
Yeah, and maybe it's just the fact that this one did feel kind of all over the place and sort of unfocused to me that leads me to feel not this feeling of completion, because I don't know what it was going for, and so by the time I get to the end, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's it. And that's kind of the way it leaves me still feeling. Like, when I first saw it, I felt very similarly, I feel like, to the way I feel about it now. It's one of those movies that I want to enjoy, and I do, to some degree, enjoy the style of how Soderbergh is presenting everything to us visually.
Or some moments. Yeah.
Yeah, but for some reason, it just doesn't. It doesn't make me feel as charmed as the first one, and I don't feel like things tie together a little too neatly in this one, I would say, as opposed to the other two, which even though you have to kind of go to some kind of silly places plot-wise, I'm much more willing to go with them in those two movies than I am with 12 for some reason.
Yeah. And I guess, for me, when I sit with it, when you're saying you don't really, because you're right, the con man, the heist plots of it are things that ultimately feel like maybe weren't really the point, which I guess is the frustrating aspect. But also, since I've kind of, as I was saying with like the stuff about this group learning to kind of be a crew and actually like work together in the sense of, choosing to work together, as opposed to just like have a job, is that I think that it's very notable about the fact that the first movie ends with the sequence of all of them looking at the fountain and one by one walking away from each other, and it ends like we've all worked together and we walked away from each other. And this one ends with all of them getting back together. Like we were just on, we were just out doing a job for 2 weeks, traveling around Europe, getting up in each other's business, supposedly having our life threatened, going into jail. And then, after it's over, we all still want to get together and play poker together. And that, I think that that's the biggest takeaway from the movie is just taking these characters and actually acknowledging them as this weird family they become.
And on that level, I do think it's a success. I think that because you do have that line in the beginning, of Ocean's 13, even when Ruben is sort of on the hospital bed and like the doctor even insinuates that like he needs family right now. And I do think that by the time they get to that line, it's much more earned than in something like the Fast and Furious franchise, because the relationships of all these characters are like, to compare this movie, I would give this movie, if I gave it a grade, I'd give it like a 3 out of 10, but I would still rather watch it than most Fast and Furious movies. Because I think that there's something always to enjoy about what I'm watching. And you're absolutely right that structurally this script hits a lot of places that I really enjoy in terms of the arc of these characters, in terms of the story of this team. But in the actual, once I'm actually down and watching it in the details of the scenes, in scene by scene, I just kind of get checked out of it. And I'm just, even though I'm laughing sometimes, for some reason, I don't feel as warm inside. And Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13 somehow just give me a feeling of like warmth. And this, I just felt cold and kind of disinterested and not super engaged.
This movie just feels like a warm bath to me. That's such
okay,
strange.
So cool. Yeah, well, I'm so glad.
Feels like sinking into a sauna.
Cool. That's amazing. No, I mean, there is, and this is going back to kind of Soderbergh's career, there's kind of a genius way in which he directs, and this is going to sound sort of almost like an insult. It's almost like he doesn't make perfect movies. He makes these kind of imperfect movies that feel so... He's so comfortable and confident in telling it that there's a real ease in the way he directs this movie, and in the way he directs every movie. There's a real just kind of comfort, and as an audience member, there's a real, like, I feel a real comfort watching it, because I feel very much in the hands of someone who is very capable of making something that is incredible. And I think that is presented in the way this movie is shot. And in the way he directs it, he really does. He shoots it, and it is a beautiful movie kind of to behold. Very similarly, I guess, to Lighthouse. It is sort of like, in a lot of ways, it's a beautiful movie to behold. But when I'm actually thinking about everything in the content, I sort of get a little less engaged with it. And this is like one of those movies that I don't know if I'll go back to Ocean's 12 very often now that I've seen it again, like twice. I sort of... it's the one is certainly the one that I'll go back to the most, and every once in a while I'll return to 13 for kind of Al Pacino's sort of like scenery chewing performance sometimes. Although I actually think Al Pacino turns in a pretty good performance in Ocean's 13. I think that
I like him in Ocean's
great.
13. It's one of his more like it's a seriously like subdued performance that people kind of in that era were not expecting out of Pacino that I think is really good.
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I just want to actively shout out Albert
Yeah.
Finney, R.I.P., because that man's a legend.
Yeah, he is amazing.
And he was also at that time tied up. Was he just in the first Bond movie? Bourne movie.
This
First
is 2004. So I think by 2004, if it's December, I think the second one had even come out. I think Bourne Supremacy had come out, but I don't remember
But
if he was.
he's only in the first one, right?
Oh, okay. I honestly don't remember. It's been a while since I've watched the
don't know.
franchise. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But I also think that that's an interesting thing, talking about the performance that Damon gives. That, like,
Yeah.
you know, these movies were 01, 04, 07, and Bourne was 02, 04, 07. Like,
Yeah.
he was running these two trilogies, like, you know, at the exact same time, and they, I think, are such different characters that I think it's really like a testament of that. I think that looking back, maybe he deserves a little more credit than some people were giving him as an actor, that he was able to play like weird stone-faced Jason Bourne, who's like, you know, action star, and then also just be like awkward, gawky pickpocket Linus Caldwell. Like, I just think it's a cool weird thing that he was doing at the exact same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I really do think that, once again, Matt Damon is, I think, the one of the stronger of the performances in this film, and I think he's great in the Bourne movies. He's a guy that kind of, like, yeah, it's weird because I don't want to say he's like an actor that it seems like people pick on, but it definitely seems like people don't kind of think of him as a person who puts in performances, but he does really put in very great performances. His performance in Dogma as kind of just this every Kevin Smith character is talkative, but he just really gave so much personality to Loki as a character, and I really enjoy him in that. And by the way, just real quick,
I think also a performance that's one of the performances that really holds up from that movie.
Yeah, Albert Finney was in the Bourne Ultimatum and the Bourne Legacy. He was actually not in the other two. I just wanted to confirm that right now.
So
which
right,
is fun
so I guess
because
Brian Cox was in the first two.
Yes, which is ironic because
yeah,
Albert Finney was in Bourne Ultimatum, which was also written by George Nolfi, who wrote this. So that's interesting.
Right.
Maybe it was because of that relationship. Who knows? But yeah, no, I really do think. Yeah, Matt Damon is an excellent performer, and I'm blanking on more recent things that he does now, because I'm mostly just now thinking of him in Kevin Smith movies, and I'm just like, oh, he was in Chainsaw and Bob reboot, but those are the ones that are just popping into my head as of recently.
Yeah, no, but you know, he's I think that he has put in a lot of, I mean, going all the way back to Talented Mr. Ripley, I think is one of the iconic film performances. I think that his performance in Talented Mr. Ripley is like a thing of legend, honestly.
A thing of legend,
and that was
interesting.
In like '99, you know.
Okay, it's been a little while since I don't even know if I have seen it. I might need to see that.
That movie's a straight masterpiece.
Okay, cool. I'll check that one out.
Oh my gosh, yeah, cannot recommend The Talented Mr. Ripley enough. That movie's just amazing.
Oh, and I'm sorry. Now I'm just remembering, just real quick, I guess, while we're talking about Matt Damon, Ford versus Ferrari. He was fucking incredible in that. I can't believe I forgot that I just recently watched that. He was incredible in that movie. No, he is definitely an amazing performer. And I mean, everyone in this movie. I don't think we need to really go into.
It's true. I mean,
like the original Ocean's 11 movie is a movie that seems like, before they even had an idea, it was just like, okay, let's get a bunch of celebrities together and make a movie where they can all look really cool and drink like cocktails and smoke cigarettes. And to some degree, Ocean's 11, Steven Soderbergh had the same inspiration. It was like, hey, let's get a bunch of celebrities. Let's have them have a great time on screen, and like they also plan this fantastic heist. And the whole cast, like, the interesting thing about the first one, the actors are kind of being brought in, other than Matt Damon. Even in the first one, he's the only one really being asked to put up a performance. Maybe him and Don Cheadle. Everyone else is kind of playing a version of themselves, it seems. Like, even Andy Garcia is kind of playing sort of not a version of himself, but maybe a version of himself that we, the audience, out in the world
Right.
kind of see him as. And
Sure.
that's why, to some degree, it's tough for me to even say that the performances they give, a lot of people give in this movie in Ocean's 12 is bad, because I think it's just because of the content that they're probably given to say that I think maybe I'm sensing the kind of the lack of investment that maybe I thought there was in Ocean's 11. But it still is kind of, they're doing what they're asked to do, which is kind of play sort of this fictional version of themselves in this kind of like, you are, instead of a movie star, you are this millionaire heist thief, like bank thief guy. Like that's kind of like, I don't know, and maybe that's a rude kind of thing to put on the actors, because I'm sure they're all doing, you know, work with their roles, but it feels
No,
like there's, go ahead.
It certainly it builds a lot of its structure around these actors' natural charm. So
Yes.
obviously,
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Thank you.
We can't veer too far off of that, because that's the thing holding all of this up, the charm of these people.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that you're correct. Like Matt Damon's probably the guy to talk about, because him and maybe Zeta Jones and Don Cheadle, they are the ones who are kind
Cheadle's
of like,
great, man.
Don Cheadle's amazing in this movie, but it frustrates me how often, you know, as much as I love the way, once again, Steven Soderbergh shoots naturalistically, I was annoyed by how often Don Cheadle seemed like he had lines that were off camera. Like, he was so often just kind of saying lines and not even there. Like, and it was just so sad to me. Like, he's not used much.
To just the unit. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not used much, and it was sad because he definitely is one of my favorite parts of the unit, and I was bummed that he didn't get to do much in this movie. But Catherine Zeta-Jones really has a lot to do, and she shines quite a bit in this movie as an actress. Like, she is, like I said, I think she's the best performance of this film. I think she's the thing that kind of gets me through this film, along with Steven Soderbergh's directing. Like, she kind of like, because I am emotionally invested in her and whatever her like arc is, which she does have an arc. I guess she's probably one of the few people who has an arc in this story, and I love her conclusion by the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right that she gets a great chance to shine, which is a bummer that she's not in the next one. But also, the next one's pretty bloated as well, and the kind of the way they write it, a way of saying it's just not their fight in the third one, I think is I think works.
Yeah. No, I think it was smart. Yeah, because at that point, it really also just felt like after 12, it really feels like they've kind of used Tess. I hate to say it, but it seems like the story has used Tess in all the ways that she's going to be really interesting, because she can't really be a player in the typical sense in most of these cons and stuff. So
right,
yeah,
but she
so
does
I mean,
her one moment where she steps up.
Yeah,
I'm willing to be part of the team in spirit.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, once again, like, she is charming in this movie, and Julia Roberts is a fantastic actress. I don't like what she was given to do in her role. The only scene I really enjoy her is in the beginning, and maybe later when she's talking to Linus on the phone, and Linus is just openly lying to her, and she's just like, "Wow, they're working you so fast."
Yeah, he would be so happy if you could be here.
Yeah, but this movie is chock full of performances, and they all show up to do what they're asked. And I do think that, to be honest, for me, they're all a little less engaging, other than the people that I mentioned. The most of this cast to me is a little less engaging than in the other two films for some reason. But their careers all speak for themselves. Like Brad Pitt, I mean, as much as I dislike his performance in this particular movie, is full of great performances. 12 Angry Men, not 12 Angry Men, 12 Monkeys is one I think of. Seven is definitely one I think of. Tree of Life, which I know a lot of people don't like that Terrence Malick movie. I love that movie, and he's amazing in that.
I mean, and Fight Club is undeniable.
Yep.
I think that his performance in Ocean's 11 is pretty undeniable.
Oh, true. Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, very true. No, I think in both 11 and 12, I'm sorry, in both 11 and 13, I think Brad Pitt is great. I think he's putting in really great performances in those two movies. For some reason, this one, I just don't connect as much. I don't know.
Also, big fan of Moneyball on this end. Moneyball.
That also might be probably one of his best performances. Man.
It's
great. No, he's really great in that.
I mean, and also Brad Pitt is one of those people who I think that Matt Damon can fall into, the people who are way more interesting once they get a little wrinklier, a little cragglier, a little older, a little more grizzled. Like once there's some lines on the face, like they're so pretty, you know, Brad Pitt is so pretty that like letting him kind of be like a tougher older guy, I think is just inherently more interesting.
Yep. Were you a fan of him? Were you a fan of his performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or did you see that one?
Yeah, I gotta watch that movie again. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't think I totally buy into the third act for a lot of reasons. But I think that his performance is, again, pretty undeniable in it. That to me, the real, the centerpiece of that movie of him visiting the ranch, that kind of whole sequence, that the building of the tension of him visiting that ranch, it's really kind of at the middle of the movie. I think that is pretty exquisite.
Okay.
Him and Dakota Fanning and Margaret Qualley and Bruce Dern, like I think that's pretty perfect. I'm not sure where I am on the rest of that movie yet. I've only seen it once.
I'm kind of in a similar place, honestly. I've seen it once, and I sort of had. Yeah, it definitely was not one of my favorites of Quentin, I guess, in terms of his filmography. I didn't connect with it quite as much as more recent films. Although I didn't really love Hateful Eight either, actually, to be honest.
I did not like Hateful Eight, though I was having a conversation with someone about my relationship with Tarantino and about how I thought that a lot of his early movies were very, very violent and were kind of criticized for their violence, but were also kind of all about these really like morally ambiguous characters doing violence to each other, and about like, what is it worth, and do these people deserve this violence, or what does it take to be a person who deals out this violence? And it's really, I think most of those movies are in the text dealing with that shit in a way that I think maybe he was just there like, oh, he's just showing violence. And I think that there was a lot to that. And then I think once you get into a point where your villains become these unambiguous, Nazis, slave owners, these unambiguous things that it's really easy to depict us doing violence against them. Like it's really easy to just depict graphic violence against Nazis or against slave owners in a way that can be cathartic and can be good, but can also be easy and is maybe not reckoning with the violence that you're doing as much. And I think that the weird slot that the Manson family falls into that, I haven't fully unpacked. Because they're depicting them almost on a level of showing they deserve it as much as Nazis or slave owners. And those were brainwashed people who technically hadn't done violence yet. I don't know. It's the third act of that movie is fucking weird.
I mean, I mean, no matter what, you always have to remember that evil people are people, and something had to get them to that point usually. And I think that's probably what he's sort of saying more so with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is like at some point, like evil people, like you have to, although it's a touchy subject. It definitely is a touchy. I don't know if that's the aspect of it that I find the most. I think to me, and we're getting off topic, but to me, I just don't get into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that much. But Brad Pitt is really good in that movie, and his performances in a lot of movies are great.
He's a good actor.
I even enjoy him in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, even though I don't always enjoy that movie either.
He's got that haircut in this movie. He's got that's the same Mr. and Mrs. Smith haircut.
It's funny how Brad Pitt's hair. I definitely thought to myself like, oh yeah, this was mid 2000s. He had that shaved head look for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in terms of other people to mention, I guess I'll just once again mention Bernie Mac. May he rest in peace as well. He is a legend and was not in enough things. Like honestly, when I think of
Carl
him,
Reiner, R.I.P.
Carl Reiner also rest in peace. Yeah, that one is also very sad. yeah, both of them have amazing careers.
Yeah.
And everyone does. I guess we probably shouldn't go too much more into everyone else's careers because there's just so many people.
Well, I also think that we're going to be trying to play the Kevin Bacon game in a minute, and so
Exactly.
We're going to be thinking about careers plenty.
Well, we might as well jump into that, I guess, since you called it out. I guess we'll jump right into the Kevin Bacon game. Well, first, actually, what is the Kevin Bacon game, Isaac? You're better at explaining this than I am.
Well, the Kevin Bacon game is based on the idea that any actor can be connected to Kevin Bacon through the other people that they have worked with. And so we're trying to create an ever-running chain of connecting actors all the way back to Kevin Bacon. Our first episode, if you want to go back and if you haven't heard that one, was us connecting the two actors from The Lighthouse to Kevin Bacon. And we've been slowly working our way, connecting to each previous film each week. And so last week we covered the infamous Warcraft.
Yes. I don't even remember who we did. I think we did I did Robert Pattinson to someone.
Ben Foster.
Ben Foster.
And then we connected Willem Dafoe and Glenn Close, which both were a disaster for us. We're still figuring out this game.
Yes. So but basically it is so this week's episode will be connected to next week's episode, whichever movie that will be. But it's also this week's episode is connected to last week's Warcraft, which means we're just picking any character from Warcraft and any character from Ocean's 12 and now connecting them. And so it's less now Kevin Bacon that's connecting them. It's more the movies that are connected from episode to episode, but we're calling it the Kevin Bacon game in the spirit.
It's Kevin Bacon game.
Yeah, this is we're going to have to eventually just give up on explaining it and just be like, if you want an explanation, go back to episode 1.
Yeah.
Remembering every episode's connection. But so this week we changed it up a little bit because I pre-prepared. I don't know. We discussed pre-preparing a challenge for each other so that I could come up with the answers just in case we're stuck for too long. We can kind of say I given, so that we won't just be constantly flustered. But I guess do you want to go first? Should I go first? I don't remember who went first last week.
You challenge me first.
Okay, so. Isaac, I challenge you to connect Catherine Zeta-Jones to Paula Patton.
Damn. Okay. I was also going to have you. I was going to also try to have you connect someone to Paula Patton. So now I'll rethink that. Catherine Zeta-Jones to Paula Patton.
Oh no. I'm
so
sorry.
Paula Patton doesn't have a huge filmography.
No.
She has worked with Tom Cruise. She has worked with Denzel.
Yes.
And okay, boom. So Paula Patton worked with Denzel in Deja Vu, who was in Philadelphia with Antonio Banderas, who was in The Mask of Zorro with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Oh my God, that's even faster than I was able to do it. I did Paula Patton, Denzel in Deja Vu, Denzel to Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, Tom Hanks to Ed Harris in Apollo 13, Ed Harris to Sean Connery in The Rock, Sean Connery to Catherine Zeta-Jones in Entrapment. And by the way, just real quick, sorry to just randomly go back to the movie.
No, this is fine. Shout out Entrapment.
I fucking love Entrapment. And I think Entrapment does the laser scene better than Ocean's 12. Anyways, we're done.
Well, the laser scene is looking at Catherine Zeta-Jones instead of looking at Vincent Cassel, so I know which one I'm going to vote for.
No, but I believe her getting through those lasers. I don't believe Vincent Cassel getting through those lasers.
Right. But also that movie was sold on her ass going underneath that laser. That movie was sold on that.
Well, you know what? Maybe as a child that succeeded for me, but I just remember loving that movie, and both Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones are amazing. Forgot to mention Entrapment.
Oh, man.
Okay, so now back to the Kevin Bacon game.
Okay.
Who should I?
So now I'm going to challenge you. And since I was thinking I was going to try to give you an easy one.
Now I forced you to give me a hard one.
Well, now I have to make one up. So I'm going to ask you to connect Don Cheadle.
Oh, Jesus.
Don Cheadle to Toby Kebbell.
Oh, God.
That just got hard. That's way unfair. That's way unfair.
All right, so I'll start with Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle was in the Oceans franchise, of course. See, this is the only thing I've seen Tony Kebbell in was Warcraft, so I'm just gonna have to actually work from Toby Kebbell.
No, but you've seen him in the Planet of the Apes and stuff.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. You're right. Okay. Planet of the Apes. Okay. All right, let's start with that. So Toby Kebbell was in Planet of the Apes with James Franco. Let's maybe try that route. James Franco to Don Cheadle. I think Ewan McGregor is the key. I need to get to Ewan McGregor because I know Ewan McGregor was in. Well, Ewan McGregor was in. Oh, fuck me. He was in a Miles Davis. Miles Ahead. Ewan McGregor was in Miles Ahead with Don Cheadle, and so I'm just like, maybe that's the route to do. So James Franco, was James Franco ever in a movie with someone? I need to just put this aside. Oh, James Franco was in Buster Scruggs with Liam Neeson's. Liam Neeson was in fucking Star Wars Episode 1.
Boom.
Yeah, I'm getting this. Episode 1 with Ewan. And then Ewan was in Miles Ahead with Don. Okay, so yeah,
that's
so
two.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's more than two, isn't it? So Toby Kebbell was in Rise of the Planet of the Apes with James Franco, who was in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs with Liam Neeson, who was in Star Wars Episode 1, fucking Phantom Menace with Ewan McGregor, and Ewan McGregor was in Miles Ahead with Don Cheadle. Boom! I finally got
realized one. If you count, you can do it in one.
Damn it! You always find the faster one.
John C. Reilly is in Kong Skull Island, and he's in Boogie Nights.
Damn it! Oh, all right. Well, apparently I can only make a link of like 5. I have to make a bigger circle.
That's so funny. Well, we're figuring it out.
I'm glad that you didn't have the answers to that either, and I was able to kind of find a route, at least maybe before you did.
So
Anyways.
I don't know. Okay, so if you really like the first Ocean's 11, are there what are your other heist movies? I guess that's the other aspect of this, is that this totally this was part of this big heist movie wave, right?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. Like I definitely think. I mean, honestly, interestingly enough, I think I enjoy Logan Lucky on some level more than all of the Ocean's movies, and I think it's because of the fact that I'm probably just invested in those characters more so, because there's less characters, so you really get to know each one a lot more deeply. And I just feel like Logan Lucky's great. The big ones I think back to, I mean, the original kind of like feel good heist con movie that I think that is also a success, because I don't think probably the original Ocean's 11 is as much of a success, is The Sting. And shout out to screenwriter David S. Ward, who I had the amazing privilege to learn from in grad school. He was one of my professors, and he is absolutely amazing. He won an Oscar for The Sting, and The Sting is an incredible fucking movie. Have you seen it?
I have not, actually. I've not seen The Sting.
Okay. All right, you need to see The Sting. I have the soundtrack on vinyl. I have the score. It's amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Even the score is incredible.
Okay, I can watch The Sting.
Oh, it's incredible.
I'm writing that down.
In terms of, it's amazing. And David S. Ward went on later to direct, and he directed, did you ever see Down Periscope?
I loved Down Periscope as a child. I mean, I haven't seen it in probably, 18 years or something, but like...
David S. Ward directed Down Periscope, and it's fucking incredible.
Hell yeah. It's like the only time Kelsey Grammer got to like be funny outside of like Cheers and Frasier, right? Like he was doing serious shit everywhere else.
So good. No, it's so amazing. And then I guess for you, what are your, and then also I'll mention on the serious side, Heat is kind of like the big.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
But it doesn't really fall it only falls in the heist category. And the interesting thing about this movie is this is the only Ocean's movie that is solely kind of a, well, actually there is some con men elements to it, but it's mostly a heist movie. It's less sort of like conning people and like putting on characters. It's a little less of that.
Yeah, the first and the third are full of little cons. All those little cons. Yeah, this is just trying a couple of big ones.
Yeah. But yeah, Heat is another one for me that is just a movie that I love, but very different in style from the Ocean's films.
Yeah, and Heat is like long enough that it like gets to be a heist movie for a good chunk, but also kind of really just feels like a classic like cops and robbers movie almost. And I know that's like, you know, maybe a minor distinction, but I think that movie gets to be a lot of things like in a good way.
Yeah,
you know,
I
for
agree.
me, I guess like as a con man movie, I mean, I love Matchstick Men. I love The Brothers Bloom is a great con man movie. That's Ryan Johnson's second film.
Yeah.
Great
That
movie.
one's fantastic.
Really good con man movie. And that whole great heist sequence in the first National Treasure of them, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. Like, that's like a great heist sequence that I think is really satisfying in a lot of ways.
I have a soft spot for the National Treasure movies. Like, I'll watch those movies, even though I admit they're not,
especially
like,
the first one. Good movie.
Oh God, yeah. No, I mean they're not the most incredible things ever made, but I'm sad that there hasn't been a third one. Like I would I'd definitely pay money to watch those movies on the big screen. They're great.
Well, and the
They're
second one
popcorn.
even like kind of sets up an idea for a third, which is really funny that they even put that in there. So yeah, I would love to see that. That'd be great.
But yeah, those are kind of the big ones, and there's a few classics that probably bear mentioning. Like I did see Rififi once, which is kind of like considered a very famous French
which I haven't seen either.
It's good. I mean, it's definitely. I watched it once in a film class in grad school once again, and it was good. But I haven't watched it again, and it's definitely one of those. Have you ever seen The Killing? That's another one. That's a Stanley Kubrick. I believe they robbed a racetrack of some sort.
Oh, and, years ago.
That's another one that I think,
yeah.
like Rififi, it's like a very serious film. They're both very serious movies, and I think the heist genre does kind of almost seem to do better if you add kind of an element of humor to it. And I guess modern day, like Heat is the only one that seems like the exception. But like when it comes to heist movies, because there's also movies like Inside Man that I can think of, which, you know, I remember enjoying, but I don't go back to them as much because I go back to the fun ones usually.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I think that having that, you know, especially because a lot of heist things, you know, especially when you look at like the first Oceans, that like they kind of inherently invite a lot of antics. So that kind of makes for comedy, you know, it's just, it almost feels when it works, it almost feels like, well, you know, it feels baked in, you know, and then you see self-serious ones and you're like, okay, well, this can work too. But often the comedy in like a con man heist movie is always, it always feels like a palpable part of it.
And that is the one thing that I will say, not about 12 kind of rides the coattails of something that 12 kind of rides the coattails that Ocean's 11 sets up, which is really a great character ensemble. Like everyone is very specific very quickly in Ocean's 11, and it doesn't take much for you to understand them and to like even like the weird, like the first scene we see the brothers, they're already like competing with each other, and like the rest of the movie they're just constantly arguing with each other, and it's just like it does such a good job of establishing these people that and maybe that once again relates to why I don't love Ocean's 12. Maybe it was too comfortable with these characters that were already so strongly established that it didn't feel like they needed to go forward at all in terms of like development, and they kind of feel stuck there to me in 12. But in 11 and 13, for some reason, like their personalities just kind of all shine, and they all have their like place in the crew in those movies to me. But yeah, just really quick, I think honestly the guy who wrote each one of these movies were written by different screenwriters, first of all, and I think the guy who wrote the first one even wrote Matchstick Men. I believe he might have, because I know it was a screenwriting duo that did Ocean's 13. I'm just honestly just
Right.
looking this up to be confirmed on that. But yeah, Ocean's 11, that was written by oh dear me, Ted Griffin, who also wrote he wrote Matchstick Men. Yeah.
Dope. Matchstick Men's a great con man movie.
No, Matchstick Men is an amazing movie. It's a great movie. Yeah, I agree.
I guess
script.
there needs to be nominal reference to Ocean's 8, but that's not a good movie. I feel bad saying it. It's just, it is a movie that has no desire to have fun. Like there are so many like fun actors in that movie. Like Kate Blanchett is always down. Helena Bonham Carter is always down. Sandra Bullock is usually down to clown. Awkwafina is like always so funny. Even Anne Hathaway, who's like the ultimate, like, give me something weird to try and I'll try it.
Yeah.
And that whole movie just is like, nobody gets to have fun in that movie.
Well, I can't imagine it just feeling sort of like a by the books version of honestly what Steven Soderbergh did. And it's kind of like a thing where I feel like the motivation of making that movie was in the wrong place, because it's like, okay, we're going to take this movie that's usually associated with a group of males, we're going to make it a group of females. And it's like, well, then just make a heist movie with a group of females.
Yeah.
Just write that
don't
story.
Don't make it Ocean's this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, don't try to steal a structure that's already been used before and it's already going to be, it's like, it's actually working less in your favor to make it be a remake, because you're going to have to do what they did but better, and that's already asking a lot in and of itself. And it's just like, yeah, go ahead.
And however good of a friend Gary Marshall is, or not Gary Marshall, geez, what's his name? Who's Gary Ross?
Oh, Gary Ross. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Gary
who directed
Ross.
Ocean's
Yeah,
8.
not Gary Marshall. Gary Ross, who like directed that and Pleasantville and Seabiscuit and stuff. Who like, and the first Hunger Games. Like, he's such a weird director, and he directed Ocean's 8. And Soderbergh has been his second unit director on multiple movies.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
He was the second unit director on Hunger Games. And people don't know that. And like, so they're like good friends. And so it almost like made sense that he took over Ocean's 8, and he's just like he does not have like the innate charm in the way he wants to shoot things, and like that kinetic energy. And he doesn't let anybody seem like they're having fun in that movie.
I mean, Soderbergh is definitely, I would say, like, he's, in terms of directors, he's probably in my top 5, like, or if not top 10. And I mean, in terms of just filmmakers, like, he's definitely one of the most talented, and just one of the, like, I don't want to say, like, it seems like it comes so easy to him. Like, it really just feels like he churns out movies, but they're of a quality that is so high that it's pretty unbelievable how much like, work that guy has done.
Yeah, he's like, maybe no more masterpieces, but I'm going to give you a lot of B+. And it's like, that's kind of dope, man, that you just like have that in you at all times. You have a B+ in you like it's nothing. Like, that's a weird and cool type of filmmaker. Yeah.
No, and I think sometimes B+ are more enjoyable to watch than A's. Like, sometimes you just kind of want to go into that world and like sit
because
through
those
that.
are usually weirder. Yeah.
Yeah. So Isaac.
Oh yeah, what's up, Chris?
What do you love?
What do I love? I'm tempted to. I feel like I always talk about like a show I'm watching or something. Man, you know what I love? I know this is gonna seem so silly. I love springtime. Like, our last couple weeks, it has finally warmed up out in Eastern PA. And like, I have been going on like walks and hikes, and just like, I have been spending so much more time outside.
What's like the temperature?
I mean, last week it was averaging like low 70s.
Oh, beautiful.
Just like put on a hoodie. It was like what we were basically calling like, it's nothing outside. You step outside and you just don't feel anything.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then like, it got like a little chillier like earlier this week, but it's just, man, it's been great. And like, kind of rounding out a year on this fucking pandemic, and I don't know, just like the idea of like, okay, let's get outside, let's get our legs moving. I'm really loving it, and it's been it's just been a really kind of like emotionally healthy thing. I'm very glad for it. Taking my dog on a lot of walks.
Ooh, that sounds nice.
Oh yeah, it's the best.
In LA, it's pretty similar. Like we're actually yesterday, I think it got up to kind of like the low 80s, but at nighttime, it's still kind of getting to that high 50s, low 60s. So at night, we keep our window open. Natalie, my partner, and I will keep that open and sort of just let that night breeze come in. And then in the day, we open up like all the windows, and it's just sometimes we'll even open up the front door and let the cross breeze come in. And it's just it's gorgeous now. It's like 70s to like low 80s right now. It's the perfect time of the year. It's about to get real unpleasant, I'm sure, when summer comes.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna be regretting it, but I know that like my next couple weeks are gonna be beautiful. Like even when it rains, it's like a warm rain. Like
I love that.
Yeah, it's the best.
I miss that.
Yeah, first when I moved back to the East Coast right in March, so like right at the beginning of spring, and I remember like the first like warm like April afternoon day where I went out and like laid in the grass and got rained on, and it was just the most magical thing. It was so great.
Was that March?
Man. Yeah.
2017 that you moved back to the East Coast?
2016.
2016. Jeez. Wow.
Yeah,
okay,
dude.
cool.
I've been
years
back
ago.
here 5 years now. Yeah, Dang, it's crazy.
That is nuts, but time. What is time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really good for everyone, and it always kind of brings out the idea of like, hey, Chris, what do you love?
Isaac. This week I gotta say I love Float Space, which is a kind of what's the best way to describe this? It's basically like a place that you go to and you spend some money and you sit in a pool.
Wait, and what is it called again?
It's called Float Space. It's this business. The place we went to, I think it has a couple of locations in Los Angeles. We went to one in Long Beach, but it's basically this place. My partner and I went to, where she actually got me a Groupon for Christmas time, and then we kind of went for a second visit as well that we paid for. But you just sort of go and you go into this room, and it has like a shower and kind of just what looks like a big white pod in it. And basically in the pod is salted Epsalt waters that are about like a foot deep. And you can close the door and kind of turn on these like luminescent lights inside. My trash is getting taken out, by the way. Can you hear that banging?
Barely.
All right, cool. Hopefully you don't hear any banging. You just basically kind of go there, and it's a place where you can go and float in the water in the dark or with kind of like a little bit of lights on, and you have kind of this flotation device to put your head on so your head doesn't like sink into the water, and you have earplugs and stuff. And
so it's like an isolation tank.
It's an isolation tank. Yeah. That's actually
awesome.
Sorry, it's like a deprivation pod almost. And so we both went for like 2-hour-long sessions, and I sort of went and I was like, all right, I'm going to try to do like diaphragm breathing. I'm going to try to do like meditating. But when I got there and I sat in the waters, like it was so easy just to become relaxed that I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to kind of lay in this and just sort of let whatever is going to happen. And sometimes my anxieties would like flare up because you're like in a room alone and like you're at a business, so it's like I don't know if someone else can like try to break in here or something, so it's just like I don't feel fully comforted. But what it majorly did for me is my ankle and my knee have been really hurting me over the last couple of weeks because I sort of went on a running spree, I guess. And really just kind of my knee and my ankle were sore lately, and just 2-hour-long sessions.
Which I told
floating.
You was going to happen.
Yeah, you did. You warned me. But 2 sessions in the float tanks, and the pain is pretty much, I don't want to jinx it, but I didn't have any pain yesterday. And the day before yesterday, I went, and then today it still feels pretty good too. So that's majorly. It's a little bit pricey. Like I think it was like $65 per person without the Groupon. So I mean, it might be actually less. It might just be $60. But it was cool. It was really well run. The guy who owned it was really nice, and it seemed really clean. And we both we had a great time. But I think we both kind of I don't know. We just both really needed kind of just. Some time to just kind of like breathe and just be silent for a while, and I think we both needed this. Yeah, it was nice.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, a meditation, I think people, and not that I'm somebody who meditates anywhere close to a lot or all the time. I've
I
done
don't
it,
really much either.
a few times in my life. But the thing about meditation is that you're not gonna ever successfully have like a perfectly clear mind, and that it's just going to stay blank and nothing's ever going to enter it. Kind of the whole point is that it's just that this state of anytime something comes, it just goes as quickly as it came.
Yep.
And you never dwell on it, and you just let it move past you the way anything can move past you. And that
that's exactly the way I
think
meditate
that once,
too.
right. And I think that that's a thing that people sometimes confuse when they first imagine the idea of like, oh, clearing your mind. It's like, obviously you're not just going to be able to like go blank. That's not really what they're asking of you. It's just about this willingness to kind of, in the words of Bruce Lee, just be like water and just kind of let it move past you, So that's awesome. I've never done an isolation tank, but I've always wanted to. It sounds amazing.
We did too, and that's kind of why she got me the Groupon. And yeah, I agree with you. It's meditating is it's just kind of, for me, it's just not allowing myself to judge my own thoughts. So if a thought comes, don't judge it. Just know that it
Hell
came.
yeah.
It came for a reason, and let it naturally leave as well. But yeah, that is kind of. I don't think. I mean, maybe if you've been doing it for years, maybe truly people get to that place of having no thoughts. But I don't think I will ever be in that place of completely being able to shut off my brain.
And
I
that's
don't think
fine.
so. Yeah, I agree. No, I mean, I don't think that's the point. It's just
Exactly.
kind of
It's
being present. Being present is the main thing that it really helps me with.
And, we talk about, when people are talking about, not to go deep into like our society and the way that society communicates with each other and like the things that we think that we have to stand up for or whatever, and or our own baked in prejudices about that idea of like, you don't believe everything you think. That, like, sometimes you'll think something and you realize that that's the way that society has taught you to think, and that's not actually a thing that you feel. And the ability to know what it's like to have a thought, just be like, okay, that entered my head, but it's just going to go past me. Yep. And I'm not going to let it, fester. I'm not going to let it define any of my actions. That like, and I think that the more time you spend in something like that, the easier that gets in like the practical application of your life, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
But yeah, so I love Float Space. I definitely am. I don't think
jealous.
I'm going to probably go back for a while because I am, as I said in episode 1, still unemployed, and
hell yeah,
it is a luxury. But it was definitely something that I think we both needed it. And as I've mentioned to you before, my partner does also have just like bodily pains a lot, and she requires a lot of stretching. So I think it helped her too with just a lot of that bodily pain. It was great. So I love.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I love Float Space. If you want to sponsor our show, please reach out to us.
yeah, reach out. Okay, well, I think that's our episode.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I didn't say this last week, but thank you to the filmmakers. And today, I guess that's Steven Soderbergh, for giving us such lush material to work with. And no matter how much I think any of us are picking on these movies that we dislike, usually we have an immense amount of respect for the filmmakers. And in this case, I don't enjoy Ocean's 12, but I honestly can say it's probably one of the very few movies by Steven Soderbergh that I don't enjoy. Like there aren't many. I think he has mostly great films in his filmography.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's this is all very much it's all to the point that, somebody can always enjoy something, and I like that we're able to have that conversation, and we appreciate everybody listening.
Yes.
Reach out to us on Twitter, pick your take yourself. Let us know where you land. Rate,
review,
subscribe, please. Anything like that obviously means the world to us.
Yes, we have a Twitter account now at Pick Your Take. I still have to set up the Facebook.
Yep.
But at Pick Your Take is our Twitter account if you want to follow us there.
And special thanks to Sean Regan for our graphic design, and thanks to Dude Robots for our music. We appreciate it. And all right, so we will see you guys again next week. We appreciate it very much. And my name is Isaac.
And my name is Chris. Thanks, Isaac. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, man. Love you.
When you're